I was going to ask for the opening hymn so that we could, you know, get in the proper mood, but there's no choir here today. My name is Father David Garcia, and I'm the director of the Old Spanish Missions for the Archdiocese of San Antonio, and very happy to be here today. And with me is Marta Tamez. She's at the table here. She's the president of the Canary Island Ascendance Association, who had that terrific event not too long ago, 10 days ago, called Nacimiento. Was absolutely terrific. And also Ramon Vasquez, who's with the American Indians in Texas Spanish Colonial Missions as well, who has done a tremendous amount of work helping us connect with our indigenous roots in San Antonio and how important the contribution of the native indigenous peoples was to the founding of the missions and the founding of the city. And Marta, of course, is connecting us to the Canary Islanders, who were the first ones to begin the civic settlement of San Antonio. And I guess I'm the one that connects us to the church because I'm supposed to be holy or something like that. And my only thing is, even though I have my undergraduate degree in history from St. Mary's University, if there's any professional historians in the room, please don't correct me in public, because there may be a lot of things to correct me with. But if you do, remember there's one thing that I have an advantage over all the other speakers is I can threaten you with hell. Okay. So, this is a panel, and so we'd like all of you to ultimately hope the last 10 or 15 minutes to be able to ask questions or to make comments or objections or whatever you would like to do. I'm going to start my presentation. I was trying to think of a way to do this because there's so many ways to talk about the missions, and I just thought I would talk about maybe what was the goal of the missionaries, how they were going to try to evangelize the Native Americans, and it was a difficult relationship at times, and times it was a very wonderful relationship which left us with these glorious structures and compounds that we call the old Spanish missions. Okay, so let's see. This is supposed to go forward, and it's not doing that. Oh, there we are. Okay, that's the most important of them, and just to be the reason being because I'm the pastor of this one. So come and visit us on Sundays at 10 and at 12, and bring your envelope or a nice donation, and you're always welcome. So the four missions are absolutely spectacular. This is the one, Concepcion, that some people may know or not know, is the only one that is completely intact as a building from the colonial period. It was founded in 1731. It's probably finished construction somewhere between 1750 and 1755. And the reason that it stayed standing while the other ones slowly collapsed during the 19th century, of course, was the other ones were built on soil that was like the typical South Texas caliche soil, and you know South Texas's climate. We have mostly dry weather, briefly interrupted every so often by floods of biblical proportions. And because of that, the soil opens and closes on a regular basis. And as it closes and opens, of course, that means the walls are moving all the time, and ultimately, the other three missions and the Alamo all collapsed. The roofs caved in. In the case of San Jose, half of the tower fell down, some of the walls fell down, and they all had to be rebuilt. But this was the only one that never fell. And the reason is, you can see there is a, on the grounds, there is a quarry. The quarry has the kind of the rocks around it. As you're in the parking lot, if you look to your left after you park, you'll see the quarry, and that's where they quarried the rock. So it's basically built on rock. And that's the geological reason why it didn't fall down, but I have another reason. It's the only one of the missions that was named after a woman, and that's why it stayed standing. It's Concepcion, you know. The other ones are San Antonio, San Jose, San Juan, and San Francisco. So the women are always tougher than the men, and we knew that. Okay, keep it going here. Let's go. I don't know where I'm pointing this to. There we go. We're probably going to struggle with this. Okay, of course, San Jose with a spectacular facade there that was in many ways built to help the Native Americans understand the story, the genealogical story of Jesus. I think I have another picture that will be able to explain it a little bit more. I'm going to be struggling with this thing the whole time. Okay, espada. Beautiful doorway, which is the one that kind of marks this particular mission. The doorway, we don't know the whole story about it, but it looks like they put it in the wrong way, which is why it is so attractive. A very Moorish kind of a doorway. If you look at the pictures of the mosques and the madrasas in Morocco, you'll see a lot of similarities with the decorations there. And this is San Juan, of course, Capistrano. When we restored it, it was the one that was ready to fall down not too long ago. We put the kind of the original coloring on it. That'll slowly get a patina on it, and it'll kind of darken as the years go by, but that's probably the way it looked at the very beginning when it first was put together. And of course, they were all built connecting themselves to the water source, the river. Originally, of course, the San Antonio de Valero, which is the one that we're celebrating this year, 1718, was the only one and the first one, and they had to move it around because it was close to the San Pedro Creek. They never found the right spot. The creek would flood at times, and so they finally moved it across the San Antonio River, and that was the final spot. But as you all know, the San Antonio de Valero mission never got finished. The original plans and the architectural plans were to have two towers that would have made it look something like Concepcion. San Jose came next. There was a big fight over whether San Jose should even be built because the priest that founded San Antonio said one is enough. As you know, in California, there's only one mission per town or per city, whereas in San Antonio we have 5. And so it's a very, very interesting, different, unique situation. So the priest that lobbied for San Jose got his wish and founded in 1720. And then the 3 missions that came, Concepcion, San Juan, and Espada, came in 1731 because they were moved from East Texas, where they had been established, and was very, very difficult to defend in that area. It was far from the resources and from the soldiers and from the supply line from northern New Spain, and so they moved them back here to create the 5. And it's interesting, the ones that were moved last were the ones that were built first. So it's a very typical in Scripture, the last shall be first, and those were the ones that were ultimately built. They all had to have the water source and for their land, for their crops, for their animals, etc. And then some of them, of course, would make the acequias to move the water and that kind of thing. The Native Americans were the ones that helped them to do that. What I'd like to kind of point out maybe during this little discussion is the art and the architecture that basically would tell the story to the Native Americans of the faith without using words. The Native Americans, there was a number of groups of Native Americans, and Ramon can talk about that more, but there was different languages, and the Franciscans were doing their best to try to communicate through signs. So as they decorated their churches, they would show the Native Americans through the arts and through the architecture something about the faith. For example, you can barely see it there, but this is a shell which is showing the door of the sacristy of San Jose, and the shell, of course, being the symbol of baptism, where you go through the door of faith, you through the sacrament of baptism, and you begin your journey of faith throughout your life. And so those of you that maybe are familiar with Santiago de Compostela, you know that whole Camino de Santiago, you wear a shell as you are walking along to show you are a pilgrim in faith going towards the shrine. So this was somewhat of the idea. Then here is in the one of the convento rooms of Concepcion, where you can see also the various ways in which they would decorate it. Very highly decorative kinds of the doorways. Very much. There's the shell again, and of course this is the back of San Jose where the convento. This is probably the most spectacular carving in all of Spanish, in terms of the United States, the Spanish colonial era. It's found, of course, on San Jose. When we were going to restore it, the guy who was the only one in the country that we would trust came out of Boston, and when he came and saw this, he said, "Father, there's nothing like this in the country. This is absolutely spectacular." He said, "I've been doing this kind of work all my life, in Europe and Latin America and everything, and this is the work of a lifetime." And I said, "You're hired. Go ahead, get to work." And so what is this? Well, it's those of you that have been to Mexico and those of you that sometimes go to the mercado, you buy these little tree of lives, Well, this is a little tree of life. That's what it is. It starts at the bottom with San Joaquin and Santa Ana. Joaquin or Joachim and Anna were the parents of Mary, the mother of Jesus. And so then the vines take you up, and just below, she's in the shade there, is Our Lady of Guadalupe, which would be the image of Mary that is most familiar to this area in the Southwest. And then you go up from the mother of Jesus, you go up to the very top, and you have St. Joseph, San Jose, who's holding the child Jesus in his arms. And so you have this whole thing about the lineage of the ancestors leading you towards Christ. And of course, Joseph is presenting Christ to everyone. And then on both sides, on the right side, as you look at it, you have St. Francis, and on the left side is St. Dominic. Francis and Dominic were the mendicant orders who came to the New World to evangelize. And so without words, you could get the story of Jesus, and you could get the story of evangelization. And so that's the way that the Franciscans used to reach out to the Indians. There was many, many ways. If you go to, you go to the great cathedrals in Europe, that's what it was too, because people were generally illiterate through most of the history of the church. And so you have to have these great stained glass windows, and you have to have all these statues and paintings in order to be able to communicate the story of the gospel, the story of Jesus, the story of the saints, through images. And you don't have to use a lot of words. And so it's like walking into a catechism. And of course, this particular door faces west. The Church of San Jose is built on an east-west axis, as is the Church of Concepcion, where the opening door faces west and the east. So the whole idea, the traditional idea, was that the sun would rise over the altar as the people face the rising sun. Of course, that's the Easter message. Jesus is the rising sun. Jesus is raised on Easter Sunday morning. And then, of course, the door of the church faces the setting sun. And so in the Gospels, you have the whole idea of the light and the darkness. The light being coming from God. God creates light to begin the world. And darkness is always seen as evil, that the powers of the evil. When Judas leaves the Last Supper, the Gospel of John says, when Judas leaves to go betray Jesus, the Gospel of John says, and it was dark. So that old power of light and darkness. So the door and all the saints and the angels that are here are facing the powers of darkness. They're the ones that protect us against the power. They're our army that faces that setting sun, that darkness that comes up. And so then the idea is you have a highly decorated door to enter into this moment in which you experience paradise. And so that the interiors of churches are beautiful and ornate and everything, not only just to honor, obviously, all the angels and saints in God, but also to give us a taste of where we're going. So we begin our journey by going through that door, and then you have that little taste of where we want to go ultimately. And so throughout this is at Concepcion. That's in the sacristy there on the right, and this is in that one room that's highly decorated. No, I'm sorry, this is in the chapel to the left as you walk in, where the bell is. Again, it's an image of a sun, very, very familiar to the Native Americans, because the sun was such an important part of their life. In many cases was considered a god. And so throughout the Southwest, you have the indigenous peoples painting suns. You can go into caves, you can go into the pueblos and stuff like that, and you see how they all had a different image of the sun as they would paint it. And the sun being a very important thing, the Franciscans knew that, and so they would paint different images of the sun. So here you have also wonderful artwork that the Franciscans would always decorate. That's an image of Our Lady of Guadalupe from 1750. It's not original to the missions, but came from one of the haciendas of central Mexico. This is a beautiful painting that was given to us from Latin America, South America, in San Jose. It's the image of the Holy Family, Joseph being the protector, but the Holy Family in pilgrimage. It's a relatively rare image in which you see Jesus decked out with his little cape and the little stick to show that they're walking, that they're in a pilgrimage. So once again, all of these beautiful artwork to indicate. Here's another very spectacular thing that happens every August 15th at Concepcion. I don't know if you've been there, but this is what we call the double solar illumination, where on August 15th at 6:30, the beams of light that come in from the outside, two windows, one above the door and one above the dome, or in the dome, coordinate so that the one on the floor there is directly below the dome. And the dome, again, in Concepcion is a cruciform dome, cruciform church, so it's right in the center of the cross, the cruciform. And the other one, of course, is on the face of Mary. Coordinated at 6:30 every August 15th. Why August 15th? That's a feast of Mary, the Mary of the Assumption. And this is a Marian church, or Immaculate Conception. So a really spectacular moment in which the Franciscans actually captured the sun and brought it inside. Now, how in the world did they know where to put those windows so that at that time, on that day, every year, you would have this spectacular double illumination? Throughout the Southwest, you find some churches that have what they call the single illumination. San Francisco de la Espada is one, where in the morning of the Feast of St. Francis, if it's not a cloudy morning, and often in October it's cloudy, it's October 4th, it comes in and hits the face of St. Francis over the altar. But this one is a very rare one because it's a double one that coordinates on two images. So to be at Concepcion on that day was spectacular. Now, what were the indigenous people seeing? Well, they were having a difficult time being lured into a building because buildings for them were simply, that was not part of their experience. They were mostly nomadic peoples, and whatever they lived in often was something that they could fold up and carry with them as they moved along. So to get them into a building, one of the ways the Franciscans did was to capture something that was familiar to them, and that would be the sun. So for an indigenous person coming inside the church on that day, they would not see the sun coming in from the outside. They would see the sun coming out from these two places. And so that would have been a very, very attractive thing for them. And of course then to paint the churches, this would be the way these churches were during the colonial period, spectacular geometric patterns with wonderful colors. Where did they get that? Well, there's a lot of Moorish background in Spain because the Moors were there for 800 years. And if you look at some of the paintings of the mosques and the madrasas in Morocco, you're going to find these images all through Morocco, which is, of course, the closest Moorish or Muslim country to Spain, and they were in Spain. And so you had this tremendous image of the influence of the Muslim decoration of their holy places, and this also attracted the Native Americans who could see these images from a distance and say, what in the world is that? You know, let's go check it out. And you'd have a Franciscan at the door to say, welcome to the parish, here's your envelopes, you know? And that would start them off on their life of faith. So finally, the rose window, again, another spectacular way in which they would decorate something to make a point. So what would this be? Well, the Native Americans that were not yet Catholic couldn't go inside the church. They weren't baptized. So the priest would stand at this highly ornate window with the Blessed Sacrament, meaning the consecrated host, showing it to the indigenous peoples who were studying to become Christians, with that kind of a spectacular setting to frame that would show the importance of that, and they would say, we want this. And so ultimately, this is what you're going to get when you become Christian. So basically, that's a little bit of what I wanted to kind of share with you. As you know, we had the World Heritage designation. We're very, very proud of that. So I want to ask Mari if she would be next and give you a little bit of from the Canary Island perspective, and then Ramon will go after that.
Thank you, Father David. Good morning. I'm Marta Tamez. I'm president of the Canary Island Ascendance Association. Full disclosure, I am honored to be with all of these great speakers and with you this morning. I am not a historian. I'm a descendant. And so what I share with you today is, of course, information based on what we would like people to know about our ancestors and about what we would like you to know about our organization. So here you have the starting point of 1690, and historians, my apologies if it's not correct, but this is basically what we have, that the Friar Masset names the site San Antonio de Padua in 1692, the 1716 Diego Ramon expedition, and then, of course, ultimately 1718, as we celebrate our Tricentennial, Alarcón expedition established Presidio San Antonio de Béjar. Our ancestors were asked to come by royal decree by King Phillip V. He approves this plan that was presented to him to have families come and protect the area from French encroachment, and also just to expand and solidify the ties for Spain. So we have a rendering of King Phillip V, obviously, because he sent us. We appreciate it because we're here today. We have 25 families that departed Santa Cruz, Tenerife on March 27, 1730. They went from Tenerife to Cuba. We did have some deaths. We had some marriages. And ultimately, they made their way from Havana, Cuba to Veracruz. This is just an example of the way we like to, in our mind, envision our family coming 1,100 miles from Veracruz to the San Antonio area, or the Villa de San Fernando area. This is a map that gives you an idea of that 1,100-mile journey that they took. They had to basically walk that entire route. They were at one point going to be landing in Corpus, but there was not an opportunity for them to have a safe voyage from Corpus, so they had to be rerouted into Veracruz. And they made their way, and these are the little towns that they stopped out, and some of them were married along the way. There was a baby also born along the way, if you can imagine that. To me, that's an amazing testament to their tenacity to come all this way from the little tiny island of Tenerife. So these are the names of the folks and the islands that they came from. And while I am going to have to bore you a little bit, I am going to say their names out loud. That's one of the things that we would like to encourage for people, is to know these names. Everyone knows about William Barrett Travis and Crockett and all of these folks, and that's wonderful. I'm in the DRT. I'm not criticizing, but what I am saying is that the Alamo was 13 days. The time period that we're talking about here, it was a Spanish territory for 100 plus years before that. So these were the folks that were doing the hard work. And we want people to become familiar with their names, because they did make the journey to establish the first civil government. We never say that they were the first people here. We never say that they were the first ones to settle the area, but we do know that they did come here in 1731 with the Spanish royal decree to establish the first cabildo, the cabildo meaning the first governmental entity. So we ask people to know Juan Leal Goraz. We ask them to recognize Juan Corbello, Juan Leal, Antonio Santos, Joseph Padron, Manuel Denis, Vicente Travieso, Salvador Rodriguez, Francisco de Arrocha, Antonio Rodriguez, Joseph Leal, Juan Delgado, Joseph Cabrera, Maria Rodriguez Provaya, Betancourt is also her last name, Maria Melian, Felipe Perez, Antonio Perez, Martin Lorenzo de Armas, and Ignacio Lorenzo de Armas. We ask that because we want people to know for 100 years, these names were the actual first mayors of San Antonio. So if you go to City Hall ever, and you'll see a plaque in the back, and it names all the mayors that were here before 1836. And there are about 100 mayors. Not all of them these individuals. Some of them are their descendants. Some of them are the Presidio soldiers. Some of them are newcomers that came. But these people also need to have their names being recognized, because they are the ones who established the building blocks. So the Spaniards were incredible documentarians, okay? You can, obviously, we're lucky that we get to do all the research that we get to do, because they documented everything. So we are blessed with the genealogy of knowing exactly when our ancestors made it here. And they arrived here based on this documentation on March 9th, 1731 at 11:30. Pretty amazing, right? I mean, I got to say that when I tell my kids, they don't really get how incredibly amazing that is. But I do have one in college at DC at Georgetown. And he said, Mom, you know, we were talking about something in class, and the professor was mentioning something, and I told him, do you know my ancestors came on, in March 9th, 1731? And he said, well, how do you know that? And he said, because it's written in the church documents. And he said, I thought to myself, oh, God, I'm turning into mother. But, it's important. And when you hear history and when you can make that connection as to where your family was or what significant thing was happening, excuse me, during that time, it is nice. And it is a fascinating opportunity to make that connection. So we know that our families came here, and there were already other folks here who were also trying to have a foothold in the area and to maintain this grand area for Spain. So we are blessed with the history of our ancestors starting San Fernando Cathedral. They worshipped in other areas. We know that because San Fernando was not started until 1738. But we do know that they were the ones, in fact, who wanted a church. There were missions here, but they came from their communities in the Canary Islands where they had their own parish. And they wanted the same thing. And they were encouraging the Presidio soldier captain to ask on their behalf if there could be funds established or there could be something to help them make a parish for their families. They were also, as I mentioned earlier, governmental officials. They were soldiers. They married into soldier families. They were ranchers and farmers, and they were merchants because they had to make a living. And quite honestly, they were farmers, but they weren't that great at it. They didn't really have access to the water that they could have. Those were all tied up with the missions. And so there was some controversy there. And let's be honest, they came from an island, okay? They were fishermen. So our ancestors are in my opinion, should be applauded 10 times fold because most of the Canary Islanders that left went to St. Bernard's Parish in Louisiana. They're fishermen. They went to Miami. They're fishermen. They went to Cuba. They're fishermen. They went to Venezuela. They're fishermen. Our ancestors probably got here and thought, oh my gosh, where in the world is the ocean? And so they had to adapt and they had to redirect themselves and figure out that they were going to have to fish in the river and they were going to have to learn how to, plow the land and make it viable for what they needed. So it was a big learning experience for them. So at this point, I always like to tell people, we're a blending of communities. We blended with the Native Americans, we blended with the Presidio soldiers, and we were the building blocks of San Antonio collectively. Not in 1731, but I'm talking about 1770s, 1760s. After several generations, they figured out, all of them collectively, that they needed each other. I mean, they absolutely needed each other in order for themselves to be viable. And so we celebrate our history by celebrating their history as well. A few little known facts, this group I'm sure absolutely knows, but a lot of times people don't know that the Canary Islanders and the Spanish Presidio soldiers and the people that were here as well, we ran cattle. We ran cattle and we sent it to Galvez, who Galvez then used it to fortify the American troops. So I'm one of the people who's blessed to say that I have an ancestor who is recognized at the Texas State Capitol through the Daughters of the American Revolution because she is documented that she, in fact, ran cattle with her family, obviously her sons, she had children, and were supporters through Galvez for the American Revolution. So that's a bit of exciting information, and we are proud of that we were participants in that way. We sent collectively this area 9,000 head of cattle between 1780 and 1782. That's pretty nifty in my book. So there's a portrait. I'm telling you something I know most of you probably are, but there's a Galvez portrait unveiled, and many Canary Island descendants are members of the Sons and the Daughters of the American Revolution because of the contributions. And in order to do this, you have to show that you donated. So the Daughters of the American Revolution are not, I mean, they're sticklers. I mean, they really ask for a lot of documentation. So you've got to be able to prove that the donation was there. And again, once again, the Spaniards, incredible documentarians, and there is that information. So there's the struggles for independence from Spain. Again, our ancestors participated. Why? Because we were here. And so we like to mention that. We have the Battle of the Rosillo, Battle of the Alazan Creek. We have the struggles for independence from Mexico. Guess what? Canary Islanders, Spanish Presidio soldiers, Native Americans, once again, participated. Very civic-minded groups who were taking care of their area and were serious about supporting what was happening in their communities. Texas, a republic state, again, participants in that as well. On both sides, I will say, because there was a struggle here. But once it was all finished, they were, in fact, came together and formed what we now know as San Antonio. The Civil War, many of us, myself included, are descendants of Civil War soldiers, again, civic-minded. And then the Canary Island descendants in general. We like to tell people that you can find yourself a descendant of Native Americans, and you're probably a Canary Island descendant somewhere along the line. You can be Mr. Tobin, Robert Tobin, if you've ever been to the Tobin Center, Canary Island descendant. So we run the gamut of San Antonio families, and we do this a lot to tell our story, because we tell you anybody can be a Canary Island descendant. We encourage people to do their genealogy. We ask them, you know, if your family has been here since at least the early 1800s, there's a really good chance that you're one of our cousins, and we want you to participate with us. So there's a lot of folks. I love doing this. I have a very good friend who she and I have been friends for 20 years, and it wasn't until about maybe 10 years ago that we realized that we were cousins. Okay, we are cousins 4 generations back, but my cousin, Deb Bolner Pro, who we sit on a lot of community together, we're actually cousins, and we've been very good friends for a very long time, and just up until 10 years ago found out. So it's exciting, and we really would love anybody who has any interest. I have some information on our organization if you'd like more information on how to become a member, and I would be doing a very terrible job if I didn't give one little pitch. I also have some information on a project we're working on with Bexar County. We are really working hard to heighten awareness of the Spanish colonial period. You walk around San Antonio and you look around, and there's nothing that says the Native American contribution. There's nothing that identifies that. There's nothing that says the Spanish Presidio soldiers were here. They were the first military in town. I mean, we're military USA. So Presidio soldiers, there's nothing that, well, I take that back. There's quite a few things that say the Spanish friars, but maybe not in the way that we'd like to tell the story. And then there's nothing that says Canary Islanders. And so we have the beautiful Spanish missions. We have the UNESCO designation. We have the amazing Alamo that people like to visit. But one thing people forget about is the people. And this project is going to talk about the people. It's going to share the story. It's going to talk about the building blocks. And it's going to, we hope, educate individuals that this was a Spanish territory and that these were the folks that were doing the hard work. Those communities of the Spanish Presidio soldiers, the Native Americans, the Canary Islanders, and the friars, those 4 communities were the building blocks. And by 1836, it was such a great place, some people were willing to die for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Father David and Mari. My name is Ramon Vasquez. I'm the Executive Director of the American Indians in Texas at the Spanish Colonial Missions. I'm the son of Ramon Vasquez y Sanchez. Most of you already know that. My mother is Gloria Vazquez. To tell you a little bit about the American Indians in Texas, some of you have been part of our journey for many years, and others maybe don't know, but we were born in 1994 there at Mission San Juan, and the reason we came to be was because family members had been trying to get back the remains of the ancestral remains that were dug up in 1967, when Archbishop Lucy gave authorization to the state of Texas to dig up the Campo Santos. And it's really, for me, I have to, I just have to put things in perspective. When I talk about ancestral remains, I'm not talking about human remains that were found in a cave that are 10,000 years old, 5,000 years old. I'm talking about human remains that could have been buried up until 1860 at Mission San Juan, until Father Bouchot said, let's stop burying people and move and start another cemetery. So we're not talking about remains that were a very long time ago. We were talking about people's grandmothers at the time in 1967. So at that point in the late 1980s, certain family members had been working with, or had been engaging the Archdiocese through the Archbishop Flores to try to get the remains back. And it wasn't until we produced the actual contract from Archbishop Lucy from '67 that people's memories were being, were jogged, and people started remembering. So at that point, Archbishop Flores said there's just too many people. If there's one group, one organization, we'll deal with it at that time. And so that's when families decided to form the American Indians in Texas at the Spanish colonial missions in 1994. In 1999, we were successful in partnering with the Archdiocese, and were able to have the ancestral remains of 150 individuals that were returned to the Archdiocese, which in turn returned them to our community, and we reinterred them on the Friday after Thanksgiving of 1999. So over 150 ancestral remains. So we thought that that was it. And so we started moving along. Our organization felt like it had accomplished what it set out to do. And through that process, though, we found out that there was a lot of misunderstandings or misconceptions that we were gone, that we were extinct. And I tell people, dodo birds go extinct. Our people evolved. People have been talking. I have, and I'll be willing to share, or you can come and look at. I have citations here at the table from 1850, since 1850 on up, from different scholars, authors, books in Paris that talk about Mission Indians of San Juan, of Espada, of San Jose, how their descendants are still there. We have documentation from the National Park Service saying we have the oldest parishes in the country. So people have been talking about this for a long time, but others have just been ignoring it, and maybe out of convenience. So as we began to help, we wanted to help San Antonio understand the Native American population and the contributions that it has made over time. And so we dug into the records, because the one thing that the Spanish did really well was they documented everything, whether it was church records or civil records. And so we can go into the civil records today, and I'm sure many of you have done this already, and you will see that the civil government did not like the missions, and that they had problems with the missions. And you will also find in there how certain contributions were made that we leave out of history. For example, in the 1740s, when the Presidio and the Witte were under attack by Apaches, it clearly says in the records that 100 mission natives from Valero came out to fight off the Apaches. I tell people, I said, What would have happened if they would have did what some of us do today when we see things happening and we just close our blinds and it's none of our business? What would have happened if the 100 Mission Indians from Mission San Antonio Valero would have not come out? Maybe the 16 families would have been all killed. Maybe the Presidio soldiers would have been killed. And maybe Spain would have said, that frontier is just too much in that San Antonio place. Let's just bring everything closer. But it didn't. It turned out differently, right? And we're celebrating San Antonio's 300th anniversary. So those are the parts of history that our organization now is pushing forward. I'm glad Marty talked about the cattle drives, because those are important things to document. And I tell people when I do my when I talk to others, I said, 9,000 head of cattle. We didn't have ATVs back then, and we didn't have drones. It took a lot of vaqueros to run 9,000 head of cattle. And who were the vaqueros? If you ever run cattle, you know how many people it takes. Who were the vaqueros? Those are the kinds of stories that we want to bring out. Father David, the mission's very beautiful. He's got a big job, right, to taking care of these missions. But they were. The Mission Indians were the ones that helped build those missions. They were the ones that were greeting other Indians at the door. So when we have the conversation, let's talk about that, because, let's talk about. And it's no secret, we believe that they should be called Indian missions, right? We believe that, our organization believes that, and we promote that. But those are the pieces of history that we need to continue to tell. Father, at Concepcion, I'm really glad that you're there and conducting Mass there again, because people need to be aware of Concepcion. Concepcion is, my goodness, Concepcion is very important. So the artwork, I tell people, I said, this is the best mission to see how art was used to engage our people in Christianity, in Catholicism. We were peyote people. There's no secret to that. Our culture was peyote culture. And the symbol that was shown on the slide, to us, to this day, still represents the peyote. I'm wearing it on my chest. The 8-pointed star is still a symbol of our morning star. The star that brings the sun across the sky, the evening star that pulls the sun across the sky. It's still the same representation to this day. And the most beautiful piece that I love at Concepcion is in the one chamber room where it has the red and yellow road across the sky, and it has the sun and with the rays depicting movement, right? It's a beautiful picture, and I'm glad we found it because it needs to be preserved. But our belief system has always been that all the celestial beings in the sky were all faces of God. There's no, you can find that in Solis Diaries, and Marta Schutz talks about it. And so when I see it, I look at that and I say, look at that. That is perfect, because it's acknowledgement to a native that says, yes, you're right. All the celestial beings are faces of God, and God looks like us. Because if you look at the face that's in the moon and in the sun, in that picture, it's clearly a Spanish face. It's no secret. This is what happened. I visited Marta Schutz in 2000, and I told her, I went up there, and after we reinterred the remains, I went up to her and I visited her in Tucson, and I said, Marta, I don't know you, but I'm here to say we forgive you. And she looked at me and said, she couldn't believe that we were there to begin with. And we had a conversation, and she welcomed us into her home, and I still talk to her today. people say, she's still alive? I'm like, yeah, I haven't heard anything different. She's living in California. But she actually came down here in 2001, because we were being acknowledged by the state of Texas as the Aboriginal people through the 77th legislature, as the Aboriginal people of Texas. That same year, the city of San Antonio also read a proclamation at the city council acknowledging us as the first people of San Antonio. And the late Archbishop Flores also produced a resolution from the Archdiocese of San Antonio acknowledging us as the first Catholics of San Antonio, of Texas. And so today we find ourselves still chugging along, trying to help others understand the contributions of the Native Americans, not only to the state of Texas, not only to the city of San Antonio, but to the state of Texas and the United States because of the trail rides. But our fight is far from over. I told you about the 1999 reburial. Well, in 2013, we had to rebury 15 other remains. And so when I talk to people about American Indians, they're like, oh, Ramon, but that was such a long time ago. Get over the history. We're sorry. We took your land, all this other stuff. And I'm like, I'm not talking a long time ago. I'm talking about 2013. And guess what? Here we are, 2017. And I had to travel to UC Davis to go get more remains from San Juan, from the 1967 dig. We had to organize an effort from SMU to bring remains from San Juan. I get a call from Texas Archaeological Resource Laboratory that says they have another 11 remains from the 1930s WPA work of Mission San Juan. That's just one mission. There's still more. And so we're trying to do the right thing. And we're trying to work with the Catholic Church because these were Catholic burials. There's still Catholic burials at each one of the missions, including Valero, because they've never been desanctified. The remains are still there. We know that there's over 1,300 buried in front of the Alamo, but nobody knows. There's no records that they've ever been removed. And these are Catholic burials. They were given Catholic burials. Forget that they were Native Americans for a minute. They were Catholics. And our struggle right now is to continue to help others understand that if these were Irish Catholic burials, we wouldn't be having the same issues. Or German Catholic burials, we wouldn't be having an issue. And so we're hoping that through the work that we're doing and the partnerships that we're developing, that we can continue to be a resource to San Antonio and help others in San Antonio that maybe just need a little bit of support in what they're trying to do. We know others have come out. We're not the Tekken Police. I am a member of the Tepilam Tekken Nation, which is a tribal community group, a tribal community that's been working for over 35 years to bring light to these issues. We've worked with we have several relationships with tribal communities throughout the country. We're working with the Native American Graves Repatriation Act under a resolution with the Wichita tribe and affiliates. We have a resolution with them where they're sponsoring our families in issues of NAGPRA. And so it seems like it's just a never-ending story for some of us. And so we hope that you guys embrace some of the work that we do. Don't shy away from us. We're not bad guys. We really just want to bring and help contribute to the history of San Antonio and Texas. Many of you know what's going on with the Alamo right now. To me, I just left the meeting from the Alamo 2 weeks ago, and I feel sometimes like the Battle of the Alamo is still happening right now. And we need to overcome that already. So it's 2018. Thank you very much, and happy Tricentennial to y'all.
Test, test. Okay. We have a few minutes, so if anybody would like to make any comments, I see some. Or you want to give? You're going to pass, and I'll pass this around. See if you can get that one working. Yeah, that one's working good. Well, the three of us are here, so go ahead.
Hi. I understand there were bodies found under Almost Dam in the 1920s. Where are those bones?
No, we don't know. There are a lot of remains still being found. We just sent a letter to Our Lady of the Lake University because they have a collection there. And I've never understood Our Lady of the Lake University to even have a curation facility for remains. So so people ask me, what do you do for a living, Ramon? And this is what I do for a living. I surf the NAGPRA databases. I go into the universities and museums, especially San Antonio's in Texas, and I look at their inventories that were submitted to NAGPRA, and then we verify it. And then we make phone calls. And if we know, we engage, we try to engage with institutions through the 106 process, it just in good faith.
In the back.
Thank you for the presentation, Ramon. I wonder if you could comment, you made reference to the role of indigenous people in building missions, and that raises the whole issue of labor. I think it's really important within the context of this conversation to talk about debt peonage, indentured servitude, and Indian slavery within the context of labor throughout the Southwest and the whole historical backdrop that drives what is, in fact, a slave-driven industry in the Americas involving indigenous peoples.
That's a tough one, definitely. So I mean, there's no question. I tell people that at some point, somebody had to make a really tough decision, and we have families that said, we're going to die. Our culture ceases to exist today as we move into this system of missionization. And then you had those that said, we're going to die today anyway, and we're not going in. And I tell people, say, which one's right? But there's no question that in some of the, if you look at the Solis Diaries, you know, how some of the Mission Indians were looked at or treated. Obviously, we don't have anything here that I know of that's as severe as some of the California writings. There are some petroglyphs that talk about some mistreatments that were described mistreatments. But yeah, somebody had to quarry the stones. It wasn't the Presidial soldiers that did it. It wasn't the Franciscans that did it, right? It was the Mission Indians that did it. They quarried the stones. They were taught the craftsmanships. There was the empresarios. The encomiendas obviously were in place. And by the time they changed that system in Mexico, it took a long time to get to San Antonio. So I mean, the records are filled with slaves, whether they're native slaves, mulatto slaves, all up into the 1800s, early 1800s. So we know that. So I hope that through the process of the preservation, through UNESCO, that we're able to talk a little bit more about who really built the missions. Was it forced labor? I don't know, but I would imagine that there was some of that, but then I would imagine too that there were some that learned the craft and just, because they were so good at it. One of the things was that you can read in the documents is that every native that was taught a skill, in whether masonry or what, they mastered it. Horseback riding, everything, text, whatever it was, they mastered it. And so I would imagine that after, after a while, they had some pride in their work as well. They were, I mean, there's human behavior as well involved in all this. I don't ever think that it was a kumbaya situation. But I mean, even to this day, it's still not a kumbaya. I mean, it must be a tough struggle. I don't, obviously the issue of forced labor was a big thing, because we know that they had to go and bring in other natives, because the ones from here would leave. We know that every mission was built for a specific tribal community. And then when it didn't work out because they left, they would bring others. We also know that Spain was in a land race, and the way they needed more citizens. So it's interesting, though, that you could see in our records, some people say, well, I'm Spanish. I said, well, how far back did you go in your records? Look at the records a little bit more, and you'll find where a Indio or a mulatto has been elevated to Spanish equivalent, status, because either they've accumulated wealth, they've gotten too powerful in the community, and of course, a mulatto or an Indio could not have wealth and could not have status, so they were elevated. And so, yeah, that's what I have to say.
I have a question for Father David.
Yes.
The quarry site southwest of Mission Concepcion, the indenture that obviously was a site where rock came out. Did that build just Mission Concepcion, or where did the limestone come from to build the 5 missions?
That's a very good question, and the only thing I can say is that when the men that were going to be doing the work on the facade of San Jose came in, and they needed to kind of match the kind of stone that was on San Jose. They went around the community, and the closest match that they found was right here at the zoo in the Sunken Gardens. And so that's their theory. I don't know if there was, maybe Ramon can tell, if there was documentation that said this stone came from this spot. I'm not sure if there is documentation on that, but these guys said the closest match they had to San Jose was at the Sunken Gardens and the zoo area. So would they have brought the stones from there? That'd be quite a hike, but they probably could have done that. But then the stones for Concepcion seem to have come from right there in front of Concepcion. There are other indications that in the southeast part of the city, there could have been some quarries as well. Most of the stone is limestone, which is why it's very difficult to keep those missions standing, because limestone absorbs water so much. And a huge part of what we're doing to restore them and keep them standing is trying to deal with water issues all the time. Water pools at the bottom of those walls and then goes up and then is released. And as it's released, it takes some of the stone with it and plaster and paintings and stuff like that. So we're always fighting with the water issues because of the kind of stone. I don't know if that helps a little bit, but that's kind of as far as we got. It's at time. One more. How about one more minute? Okay.
Wonderful presentations. Last Friday, we had the honor of going to the mission of San Saba for the ceremony to bless the area of the old mission, which had been sort of rediscovered and replanted. And going back to the Canary Islanders, there was an impetus from Canary Islanders. They were very much a part of that mission of San Saba. And if anybody didn't know where that is, it's San Saba. Yeah. Just in case. But we never hear, I mean, literally 3 weeks ago, my knowledge of San Saba was about a paragraph or two sentence paragraph, it has evolved over the last week into being something significantly bigger than that, almost being what you would call a planned residential development, with the Presidio being 4 miles away from the mission on purpose because of the tanglement that got into the missions and the local settlers, et cetera, down here in the San Antonio area. We sort of lose San Saba in that whole thing. I would love to see it come back in. Is there any sense of sort of incorporating that mindset back into the whole ideal of the 5 missions of San Antonio? And it was very much a part of it.
Yeah, so one thing here, and Dr. Hinojosa is here someplace, but I love what he says, because he brings to perspective the idea that these were pueblos. These were native pueblos, Indian pueblos, right, that were led by Franciscan for their spiritual needs. And at one time, there was 7 different independent communities in San Antonio coexisting. And I think that's so important to understand. We don't talk about that enough, right? We had 7 independent communities in San Antonio. We had the 5 missions, we had the Witte and the Presidio. And so those are the type of conversations that I would like to see brought back, because we leave out certain. I mean, there was the auto de posesiones that took place at each one of the missions. And I think those, I've heard them be dismissed as they don't really mean anything. This is what I've heard. They don't really mean anything. They're kind of just ceremonial stuff. But they meant enough to be written in our historical documents, the dates, and the importance of the dates. For example, Concepcion, San Jose, Espada, San Juan, and Concepcion were all the auto de posesión was all conducted on March 5th, 1731. All 3 of them. And my understanding is that the reason, this is my prima over here, right, Canary Island. My understanding was that the reason that all 3 were conducted on the same day was because 4 days later, the Canary Islanders were due to arrive. And the fear by the missionaries, by the Franciscans, that land would be taken was what drove that event. So, thank you for that question.
Also, just if those of you who have been to Sama and seen the exhibit, there is one painting on that massacre and that attack on San Saba that Marian Edgar always says that's one of the most important paintings of the colonial era, because it is a depiction of what happened or what's supposed to have happened at that time. He always lifts that up, and I think that one came from Mexico, Mexico City, and it's a very, obviously, it's like a martyrdom type of painting, but it does begin to give you a sense of what the mission was like. It was basically a wooden kind of small little wooden fortress. But that's, if you haven't seen the exhibit over there, it's really a terrific exhibit. Well, thank you all very much for your time, and God bless you all. You too. You too.